I'm sure many of you guys saw that recently Maria Emmerich came out with a new egg white bread recipe, and she titled it the easiest protein sparing bread recipe ever, or something like that. And it does look very easy and very convenient. The main difference is that you don't use fresh egg whites at all. You only use egg white powder. So instead of using a cup of the egg white powder, you use 1.5 cups and you add water because it needs liquid from somewhere. So of course I have to try this out. Besides adding the water and removing the fresh egg whites, all of the ingredients are the same. 1/4 cup of allulose, 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then of course the 1.5 cups of egg white powder. I will link to Maria's full recipe down below. But I do 80 grams of egg white powder per cup, so 1.5 cups would be 120 grams. So we're putting in all of the dry ingredients first, adding 1/4 cup of allulose, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar, and I'm just gonna give that a quick stir with my measuring spoon here. I'm gonna just turn it on low before I add in the water slowly. And then I'm gonna turn it up to high and mix it on high for 5 minutes. As mixing, I'm gonna turn on the oven to 325. It has been exactly 5 minutes, and that is done. It's definitely softer, not as stiff. I also really like that it didn't make my mixer completely a disaster. So those are positives. Look at how beautiful this batter looks. It does look more like batter than the other just because it's not quite so stiff. All right, I am using my parchment paper lined pan like I always do, and I have found, at least when I use whole egg powder, it doesn't stick too bad to the parchment paper even without the oil, so I'm not gonna do the oil this time. This will be the first time I'm trying it with just the egg white powder though, so we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't stick too bad. After I do this loaf, I'm gonna try to do some experiments with this method and some whole egg powder. I'm gonna try 2 different things. The first one I don't have a lot of hope for, but I think it's worth a try. Second one I have more hope for. What I'm gonna do is do the first one with 1 cup of egg white powder and 1/2 cup of the whole egg powder, and put the whole egg powder in at the beginning with the egg white powder and see if it'll still whip up. I don't know. That's why I kind of don't have a lot of hope for it. So if that works, great. If that doesn't work, I'm gonna try whipping up the egg white powder only with the water and the other ingredients, and then stirring in the whole egg powder at the end and see what kind of results I get. I do like how this batter is a little bit softer and makes it easier to just, you know, pour into the pan rather than having to really form it. Oven is preheated. It's so convenient right when I need it to be. I'm gonna throw this in the oven, and the cook time is the same as the original, which is 30 minutes, but you don't have to let it sit in the oven for 30 minutes afterwards to let it cool. You can just pull it right out and let it cool on the counter. All right, look at this. Oh my goodness. So the top is nice and brown. I wouldn't want it any browner than that. Kind of did a crazy split on the side. Let's see what the other side looks like. Whoa, it is so nuts. Looks pretty though. It's so shiny. I'll be interested to see the difference in texture. I think it'll probably be similar to the experiment I did where I whipped the egg white powder in at the beginning with the liquid egg whites. I think whipping up the powder for any length of time just gives it like that glossy, really smooth, really like tight bubbles texture. And that's what I'm thinking this is gonna have. All right, gonna let it cool before I take it out of the pan. I'll let it cool probably 15 minutes or so in the pan, take it out of the pan, let it cool the rest of the way. Now for the riskier experiment, I have my 1 cup of egg white powder and the cream of tartar, the salt, and the allulose in there. I'm gonna add 40 grams of the whole egg powder and get it mixed up with the water and see what happens. Just gonna let this stir up for a second before I add in the water. 1.5 cups of water. And now for the moment of truth. I had to put the towel because it was splattering so bad. Obviously a fail. It did not whip it up at all. It just looks like really watery scrambled eggs. Oh well, it was worth a try. Made a mess, but I did it, so you guys don't have to. 1 experiment down, 1 more to go. So I have all my dry ingredients in here except for the whole egg powder. So I'm doing 1 cup of egg white powder, half a teaspoon of cream of tartar, half a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 cup of allulose. That's all mixed up. I'm gonna add in my 1.5 cups of water and see if this will blend up correctly with a little bit less of the egg white powder. And then I will gently mix in the whole egg powder at the end and see if I can get a good result. It's been mixing for 5 minutes. Of course, the batter is not as thick as with the whole 1.5 cups of egg white powder, but I'm gonna add in the 1/2 cup or 40 grams of the whole egg powder and mix that in really gently. See what we get. Doesn't look like I lost a whole lot of volume yet, which is kind of nice. I like how much height I have still. That's a positive sign. Not quite as much deflation as with adding whole egg powder to the whipped fresh egg whites. So every other loaf that I've done that has whole egg powder in it has taken 45 minutes to cook. So I'm planning towards this taking 45 minutes, but I will be checking it at 30 minutes just in case. There we go. Not a very rounded loaf, pretty flat, but we'll see how it tastes when it gets cooled off. So the top definitely sunk in a fair amount. The sides didn't really sink in though, that's cool. Wow, the sides look beautiful. Looks like a perfect loaf of bread. Time to slice these up and do a little taste test. Let's look at this. This is such a fine texture. It's like memory foam or something. Super tiny bubbles, but it's very similar to the experiment I did where I whipped the egg white powder in from the beginning. Very similar. There's how it rips. Looks pretty nice on the inside. Let me give it a quick taste test. The flavor is pretty good. I mean, it's obviously going to be really similar to the original version because the ingredients are so similar. It might have a little less flavor than the original. Maybe the fresh egg whites give it a little bit more of a savory flavor. I don't know. But I think it's such a small difference that it probably doesn't really matter, especially when you get fillings in here. The texture is a little bit finer, like I said, so you can definitely taste that or feel that in the texture when you eat it. I will say it definitely was easier. The convenience factor on this one is really hard to beat. I normally separate my egg whites and, you know, save the yolks for other things. So of course you don't get the yolks when you do this, but it was so easy. Separating eggs is not a fun chore. So just for that alone, it's almost worth it for the convenience. The sides sunk in, so got some pretty funky shaped slices here, but of course, it's still gonna taste good. All right, let's try the whole egg powder bread. Oh, this one has big bubbles in it. Huh, interesting. All right, look at that. Oh my goodness, that's totally different than the whole egg powder bread that I did before. That is weird. It kinda, let's see, let's just see what it tastes like. I'm afraid it's gonna be too eggy because it's got a different texture because of how big the bubbles are. That is super weird. The flavor is fine, but the texture is a little bit eggy. It reminds me of like coral or something, the look of it. I might use this up as French toast or something because it's gonna soak up a lot of egg to make French toast with. It's just so weird. Gosh, you never know what you're gonna get with this bread. It's so crazy. It's like a science experiment every time. I wonder if you could start with less water because I whipped up the 1 cup of egg white powder with the 1.5 cups of water. And I wonder if I whipped it up with less water at the beginning, then I could get it to whip up to the same consistency that the original did. But then if I added the whole egg powder, I don't know if it would be a lot more dry because it didn't have as much liquid as the original recipe. I don't really know. I have a feeling that when I make the bread with the whole egg powder, I'm just gonna go by the original recipe that I did where I used the fresh egg whites. I think that was my best whole egg powder loaf. But if I'm wanting to cook an all egg white loaf and I need it to be quick, I'm thinking this would be a great option. I'm thinking for a really quick dinner, if I'm, you know, in a rush, I would use this recipe with just the egg white powder to whip up like a quick batch to make pizza crust or something like that. If I'm just in a rush, I think it's a really, really great option. And I think for a pizza crust, this would be a really good batter to use just because it's so thick. The foam is just so tight. I think it would probably be really good on a pizza where you're making it really thin and you want it to still, you know, hold its shape and to be able to, you know, pick it up and eat it. So I definitely see myself using this recipe a lot if I'm in a rush making a loaf or if I'm in a rush making something like pizza or Hot Pockets or something like that. I'm very happy with this new, easier variation. So thanks so much for coming along on this experiment. It always amazes me how much you can do with this one simple recipe, and I will continue to experiment with it until I've exhausted all of the options, which I expect will be in quite some time. Hope you guys are all doing great, and I'll see you again in the next video.